Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a really fascinating automotive mystery to uncover what actually killed the American muscle car. Seriously, this is a wild story. It's got raw horsepower, massive cultural shifts, and this sudden total collapse that completely changed the automotive landscape forever. Let's get right into it. So if you ask most car fans when the muscle car era officially ended, they're probably going to confidently point right to 1973. I mean, the common story goes that the OPEC oil embargo single-handedly murdered the V8 overnight, right? But did it? Was it really just this one geopolitical event that wiped out the absolute most iconic era in American automotive history? Well, here's the reality check. While that embargo absolutely delivered the fatal blow, the muscle car was actually already bleeding out. What we're really looking at is a three-part perfect storm. The truth is, the muscle car was actively being hunted down by two hidden assassins years before a single barrel of OPEC oil was ever withheld. But, to understand how this all went down, we first need to look at exactly what they were attacking. Part 1. The Golden Age. Cheap power and endless optimism. To really grasp the tragedy of the muscle car's death, we've got to step back into this crazy, unique window in the mid-1960s. I'm talking about a time defined by cheap gas, super loose regulations, and just limitless ambition. From roughly 1964 to 1970, Detroit was locked in this spectacular horsepower war. Automakers were just churning out legends: the Pontiac GTO, the Ford Mustang, the Dodge Charger. But what made this era so revolutionary wasn't just the sheer power, though we're talking a massive 425 to 450 horsepower here. It was the accessibility. Working-class kids could literally walk into a dealership, put maybe a few $100 down, and drive off in a 450 horsepower missile for the exact same price as a boring family sedan. It was basically a democratic performance revolution. But, as you might guess, building the most powerful cars in history and then selling them to the youngest, least experienced drivers on the road, yeah, that had some pretty predictable consequences. Which brings us to part 2 and assassin number 1, the actuaries, the hidden financial wall. So, our first hidden assassin was actually the insurance industry. And honestly, they spotted the problem way before anyone in Washington even had a clue. By the late 60s, insurance actuaries were crunching their data and the math was glaringly obvious. Young guys driving these high horsepower cars were just massive liabilities. The crash and claim rates were through the roof, making underwriting them a total losing proposition for the insurance companies. They absolutely had to react. And man, their reaction was swift and brutal. Insurers started outright refusing coverage for under 25 drivers in these cars, or they'd slap them with these huge, massive surcharges. Just to put this into perspective, by 1969, if a 17-year-old tried to insure a Chevy Chevelle SS 396, the annual insurance premium could actually be more than the car payments themselves. No way, right? Imagine paying more to insure the car than to buy it. This basically built a hidden financial wall, silently pricing the core demographic of buyers completely out of the market. And this was years before gas prices even became a thing. Part 3. Assassin number 2. Smog, rules, and detuning. The federal chokehold. Okay, so if the insurance companies priced the buyers out, the federal government came in and squeezed the performance out. Just looking at this timeline, you can see how the pressure built up. In 1970, the Clean Air Act amendments aggressively targeted vehicle emissions. Then, to meet these new rules and protect the newly mandated catalytic converters, refiners had to shift over to unleaded fuel starting around 1971. The problem? Unleaded fuel back then had a much lower octane rating, which made those high-compression muscle car engines detonate unpredictably. Detroit was cornered. Their only real solution was to drastically lower engine compression ratios across the board. And as we see here, this whole chain of events leads right into the mid-70s with the rollout of CAFE, that's Corporate Average Fuel Economy Standards, which forced automakers to hit strict fleet-wide miles per gallon averages. And you really just have to look at the Chevy Corvette to see the damage this did. In 1970, it boasted a compression ratio of 11-to-1, easily pushing out over 350 horsepower. But just 2 years later, just to run on that lower octane unleaded fuel, that exact same engine architecture had its compression slashed down to 8.5-to-1. The result, it was choked all the way down to 270 horsepower. The engine size itself didn't shrink at all, but the power just completely evaporated. Across the entire industry, these iconic engines lost nearly 40% of their horsepower by 1972. It's kind of sad, actually. Buyers were walking into showrooms thinking they were getting a beast of a performance car, but they were driving home in something that was heavily neutered. So the muscle car was effectively dying from two directions at once. It was way too expensive to insure, and it was rapidly losing the very horsepower that literally defined it. Moving to part 4, Assassin number 3, the 1973 fatal blow, the embargo that burned the house down. By this point, the auto industry was already on its knees. And then came October 1973. Now, the OPEC oil embargo didn't start the fire, but man, it absolutely burned the house to the ground. Almost overnight, the price of gasoline nearly quadrupled. We went from a breezy average of 38 cents a gallon to a seriously wallet-draining $1.20. For your average working-class family, this wasn't just some minor inconvenience. It was a full-blown crisis that completely blew up the household budget. Panic completely took hold across America. Supply chains just couldn't handle the sudden shift, which led to these humiliating 5-mile-long gas lines. I mean, states actually had to implement odd, even license plate rationing just to manage the sheer chaos. And yeah, frustrations got so high that people were getting into literal fistfights at the pumps. To try and conserve what fuel we had, the federal government stepped in and slapped this suffocating 55-mile-per-hour speed limit on the entire country. Because of all this, the cultural math completely reversed. A 12-mile-per-gallon V8 muscle car went from being this ultimate symbol of American freedom and triumph straight to being a massive financial burden. And buyers, they pivoted with shocking speed. They abandoned domestic muscle cars in droves, rushing toward these practical, super fuel-efficient Japanese imports like the Toyota Corolla and the Honda Civic. Get this, in a single model year, domestic muscle car sales fell by more than half. Just boom, gone. Part 5. The Aftermath. Welcome to the malaise era. What followed from roughly 1974 to 1983 is known to car enthusiasts as the malaise era. And trust me, it was a humiliating dark age for American performance. Detroit completely panicked. They started rushing out these replacements that just felt like an absolute betrayal to their loyal fans. The most infamous example has got to be the 1974 Mustang II. Ford literally built it on the chassis of a subcompact Pinto, and its base 4-cylinder engine packed a laughably pathetic 88 horsepower. Seriously, 88. This was a car that used to absolutely terrorize drag strips, and suddenly it was struggling just to merge onto the highway. Meanwhile, you had all these badge-engineered economy clones like the Chevy Monza and Pontiac Astray just slapping on performance decals to look cool. Even the mighty Dodge Charger was eventually reduced to a front-wheel drive economy car. It was official. The soul of American performance was essentially gone. Part 6. A Priceless Legacy. Buying Back a Stolen Dream. So here's why all of this still matters so much today. The sudden, violent death of the muscle car created this massive emotional vacuum. If you walk into any high-end classic car auction right now, you're going to see original, numbers-matching pre-1972 muscle cars routinely crossing the block for mind-blowing sums, sometimes upwards of $500,000. The guys who were teenagers when these cars were brand new, you know, the ones who had their automotive dreams totally cut short by insane insurance rates and gas lines, well, they're now spending small fortunes to buy back the exact pristine machines they missed out on in their youth. And because that malaise era offered practically zero genuine performance, the classic cars that actually survived became fiercely collectible. The muscle car era was extraordinary precisely because it was finite. It was like a shooting star. It just couldn't last. That perfect storm of actuaries, federal regulators, and oil embargoes ultimately turned these surviving machines into literal rolling monuments. They're the perfect time capsules of a cultural moment we will absolutely never see again. So, as we wrap up this explainer and watch modern combustion engines face their very own regulatory sunset, what with the huge transition to EVs, even stricter emissions, and shifting global energy markets, we really have to ask, are we watching history repeat itself right now? Will today's V8s become the $500,000 rolling monuments of tomorrow? It's definitely something to think about the next time you hear a rumbling exhaust out on the highway. Thank you so much for joining me today to unpack the real story behind the death of the American muscle car. See ya next time.